Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Linda Mascott and I'll be chairing the hearing today. Could I please remind everybody to mute your cameras and your microphones unless you are actively participating in this point of the meeting. Thank you very much. I would like to introduce everybody who is participating in the meeting at the moment. So we'll go through everybody who's here. Councillor Anne Davidson.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you. Councillor David Jones.
Hello, I'm Councillor David Jones and I'm the member for Motion Lodge.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Roberts.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Councillor Ian Roberts and I'm from sunny South Woodham Ferrers.
Thank you. William Butcher.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is William Butcher and I'm one of the legal advisors to the committee this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Bird.
Good afternoon, Dan Bird and Democratic Services. Thank you.
Thank you. Lacey Latimer.
Good afternoon, my name is Lacey Latimer and I'm a licensing officer at Chelmsford City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Victoria Marsh.
Good afternoon, I'm Victoria Marsh and I'm also a legal advisor to the committee.
Thank you. Nigel Dermott. You're muted, Nigel. We can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now, Linda?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Good afternoon. Apologies for that. I'm Nigel Dermott. I'm the lead licensing officer at the council.
Thank you. We have Mrs. Nikki Mendes. Good afternoon. Would you like to hello?
Hello, sorry, getting used to the technology. Good afternoon, I'm Nikki Mendes, founder of The Only Way is Gian.
Thank you very much. Mr. Matt Bell.
Yes, hello, sorry. Matt Bell, 21st Century Licensing, representing Nikki Mendes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ayman Saeed.
Hi, yes, it's Ayman. I'm General Secretary of Chelmsford Muslim Society.
Thank you. Could you turn your cameras off when you have introduced yourself, if that's all right? Thank you. Is Mr. Mohammed Nawaz here? No?
No, they haven't joined the meeting.
Oh, okay. Is anybody else? Sorry, Councillor Graham Pooley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Graham Pooley, Councillor for Molsham Central Ward, which is where the premises are located.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the meeting who would like to introduce themselves?
We've also had Nasser Hussain join, who was one of the objectors.
Okay. Mr. Hussain, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep, I'm Nasser Hussain and I'm a regular visitor of Chelmsford Mosque.
Okay, thank you very much. Just before we start the meeting, just to confirm that everybody understands the procedure to be followed, and the members of committee have read and reflected on all the representations made. Only those who have submitted representations are allowed to speak at the meeting. Anyone else can attend and observe, but are not allowed to speak. And would anybody like to withdraw their representation? Is there a request to adjourn the meeting at all? Okay. Could I please now ask, there are no apologies for absence, everybody is here. Declaration of interest, could I just remind members of the committee they must disclose any interests they know that have in items of business on this meeting's agenda, and they must do some at this point at the agenda as soon as they become aware of their interest. If it's a disclosable pecuniary interest, they're obliged to notify the monitoring officer within 28 days of this meeting. Thank you very much. Okay. The minutes of the meeting of the 4th of May, I'm happy with those as a correct representation, so I'm happy to sign those. Has anybody got any objections?
Fine by me. Ian Roberts here. Fine by me.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Can we move on to agenda item 4 then, please? Which can I ask Lacey to introduce the matter before the committee today?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to consider an application for a new premises licence having regard to representations received and the requirement to promote the 4 licensing objectives: the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, the protection of children from harm. Members are advised that they have the following options when determining this application: grant the application on the terms and conditions applied for, grant the application on the terms and conditions applied for, modified to such extent as considered appropriate to promote the licensing objectives, refuse the application in whole or in part. The committee is reminded that the applicant or any person making representation in relation to this matter may appeal the decision of the council to the Magistrates' Court. Members are requested to consider an application by the Only Way is Gin Limited made under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 for a new premises licence in respect of 13 Molsham Street, Chelmsford, having regard to representations received and the requirement to promote the licensing objectives. Members are advised that the premises to which the application relates already has a premises licence. The premises licence was granted in July 2018, and the licensing officers are unaware of any complaints that have been made and received by the council. A copy of the existing licence is attached as Appendix A to this report. The premises also has existing authority granting the manager of the premises use of the land of the front of the premises to place tables and chairs. The application for a premises licence was received on the 1st of April 2020 and correctly advertised by the placing of blue notices at the premises, publication in a local newspaper and on Chelmsford City Council's website. The public notice was correctly displayed on the premises for a period of 28 days commencing the day after the submission of the application. The premises licence application from the Only Way is Gin Limited applies for the below activities. The completed application form, together with a plan of the proposed premises, is attached as Appendix B to this report. Members are advised that during the consultation period, the applicant amended their application in respect of the provision of music, as the Deregulation of Music Act 2015 amended the Licensing Act 2003. In processing this application, Chelmsford City Council, in accordance with the Act, sent a copy of the application to each of the responsible authorities listed below. Responses to the consultation have been received from Essex Police, who did not make any representations against the grant of the application as applied for. 28 representations have been received, 1 from a local ward councillor and 27 from members of the public, of whom are all members of the Mosque. The Mosque neighbours the premises in respect of the application. The representation are attached as Appendix C to this report. Members are advised that the majority of the representations relate to moral and religious beliefs. Moral and religious beliefs are not considered to be relevant to the licensing objectives. The relevant sections of the Statement of Licensing Policy are brought to the attention of members and are as follows. When assessing applications, the licensing authority must be satisfied that the measures proposed in the applicant's operating schedule to promote the 4 licensing objectives aim to achieve that outcome as far as possible. Where relevant representations are made, the Council will seek to make objective judgments to whether conditions may need to be attached to the various authorisations to secure promotion of the licensing objectives. The licensing authority recognises that all applications should be considered on an individual basis, and any condition attached to the licence will such be tailored to each individual premises in order to avoid the imposition of disproportionate and other burdensome conditions on those premises. Standard conditions will therefore be avoided, and no condition will be imposed that cannot be shown to be appropriate and proportionate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. That concludes my report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lacey. Could I invite the applicant to present their case, please?
Good afternoon. Yes, thank you. As you've heard, the application today is by an organisation. The Only Way is Gin Limited. The director of that organisation is Nicola Jane Mendes, who I shall refer to as Nikki. You've met her on the introduction. Can I confirm, Chair, that the bundles that we provided, there's one that looks like this, and there's another that looks like this. There's a little page extra in the back, that they've been received and everyone has them. I'm assuming, unless hear otherwise, the answer is yes.
Yes, we've received all of the information and have perused that. Thank you.
OK, thank you very much. Now, the business plan for these premises is contingent upon the grant of this licence today, and so it is the case that some of the site works are yet to take place at the premises. Now, in the original application, the start date that was sought was the 1st of September. With the passage of time and reflection, it's clear that if you're minded to grant this, there are some aspects of the business which could be brought up and online before that time. For example, the online sales component, which we'll come on to. So it's asked, if you're minded to bring that start date forward to the 1st of August. Hopefully that's within your purview. In short, today we are here arising from representations that are closely linked to the mosque and its users. You've heard, you've got the representations now. It's not my intention to address each of those 28 representations in order and one at a time, because this is going to prove repetitious and rather time consuming. So instead, I hope to give you parcels of information. I hope to speak to the key themes. And Nikki engaged in consultation in the early part of this year, and that included conversations with the mosque management and the city's licence team. And when she made the application in the beginning, she did so unsupported by a licence specialist. And as you've heard touched upon there were a couple of inconsistencies with the paperwork in the beginning, but they've been dealt with, and I shall come to those shortly in the sake of clarity. You'll probably be aware, although it's not really for the committee today, that there is a parallel planning application, which I understand, but for a flood risk assessment, is moving along as we would expect. I'd like to talk a bit about the location. So the site that we're talking about sits in one of the city's primary commercial districts. It already has a thriving, if currently suppressed, nighttime economy. You may be aware of the Chelmsford Town Area Action Plan that acknowledges the regional significance of the area and the fact that there are some deficiencies in relation to the leisure and culture sectors. Now, I'd like to talk a bit about the other nearby licensed premises. And I want to do that because a number of representations speak to this question of the locality of licensed premises and their proximity of certain classes so close to the mosque. And at least one representation talks about how this application shouldn't exceed the terms of other nearby licences. Well, as you've heard from Lacey, this case has to be on its own merits. Now, the truth is that current lockdown and some limitations of the city's online web facility has made it difficult to provide an absolutely reliable picture of the immediate environment, but with the assistance of the City Council's licensing team and some site visits, I hope to give you some information that will put these things into context. So if I can start, please, by asking members of the committee to go to our bundle, this bundle, and turn, please, to pages 3 and 4, perhaps starting with page 4. Now, it's a bit difficult because I can't really see anyone to judge whether or not everyone's reached the right point. So unless I hear otherwise, I'm going to assume and just carry on. Okay.
We all have electronic copies of this, so it's quite easy for us to find it. Okay. So we've checked that. So unless there is a problem with anybody, we've all looked at it in advance and got separate copies. Excuse me if I turn to the left, but being on the meeting on here, I've got my iPad with all the information on here. So that's why we have all the information in front of us. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to give you moments to get to the relevant bit and just carry on. Otherwise, we'll be here all day. So page 4 lists the licensed premises that are in the immediate vicinity. And you can see the terminal hours there and their addresses. If I can ask you to leaf back to page 3, which is the plan. Now, on the plan, you will see areas that are marked in red. Now, these are licensed premises in the immediate vicinity that are undisputed to exist. There are some marked in green. Now, I've referred to these as putative restaurant sites. As you'll see shortly, everything from a site visit indicates that these are or very shortly will become licensed premises, but the records held by the City Council don't do so. There's an odd inconsistency. We don't know the answer. Equally, there's one there in blue, which is one of the licensed premises, we're pretty sure, and you'll see why. But the records of the City Council haven't confirmed that. You can see the pink section is what we think is the footprint of the mosque. Going back to page 4, you'll see that some of the items are highlighted in yellow, and that is because amongst the representations there were comments about not being open later than other places in the immediate environment. Now, those places, as you can see, the terminal hours are later than we seek. There's 5 of them. In fact, 4 of them are very significantly later. Now, we're only looking for Friday and Saturday night, and at least 3 of those are all week. Right. Now, if I can take you, please, to the pages 5 through to 8. These are the images of the area which I'm sure you will recognise. However, alongside this, if I can ask you to look at page 56, which is slightly out of sequence, and my apologies for that, but page 56 shows the building that is perpendicular to the building line of the mosque and our premises at number 13. And hopefully, I don't know how clear this has come out in your image, but you can see on the side wall of that, above the 2 darkened windows, there's a sign. That advert is a direction to the Taj Mahal restaurant in Baddow Road. Going back to page 5, I'm only going to touch on these quickly because I realise you're familiar. Page 5, this is for the courtyard. It has an address in Baddow Road, but extends all the way through to Parkway. Over the page is one of these sites that I described as putative. It's marked up as Barbell Bistro. Again, a restaurant, it seems. A city centre restaurant opportunity is its marketing label. It's in Baddow Road. It extends all the way through to Parkway. On page 7, you can see the front doors to the Taj Mahal and the Lang Thong Thai. As best we can establish, the footprint of these premises goes much further back into the block of the buildings, but we haven't had the benefit of being able to get in and see. Beneath those, on page 7, you can see 2 places which we've referred to as putative. On the left is a restaurant called 7 Elephants, and on the right is a thing called Authentico, which I think is about to become an Italian restaurant, both on Baddow Road. Now, referring to the place, the premises that I showed you on page 56, initially we thought this was part of the mosque. However, we noticed a planning application outside that led us to a number of online public records. We've put these in your bundle. I'm sure you've looked at them. Perhaps if I can ask you to look at page 12, my only point, 2 points in fact. One is that you can see it's labelled up with restaurant, former restaurant, and that the applicant's name is Chowdhury. I understand from the licensing team that the licence holder of the Taj Mahal is in fact Mr. Chowdhury. We've rather concluded, therefore, that this building,
which is right next to the mosque, but on the other side is closely connected with the Taj Mahal or an associated licensed restaurant. Also, we've concluded that the mosque footprint's perhaps a bit smaller than we thought. So, however you look at it, there are already a lot of licensed premises in the immediate vicinity of the mosque, and some of them are really very much cheek to cheek. The reason I've gone to this length is because, unlike some of the representations, it's hardly virgin territory for licensed premises. And I think many of those making representations have failed to grasp those simple facts. Perhaps we'll hear. I'd like to talk now about the existing licence at the premises for which we apply. And you've heard from Lacey that in the bundle there is, I think it's the Part B summary of the existing licence there. And in our bundle at pages 13 to 18 are the conditions which relate to the existing licence. Perhaps if you go to page 16, you'll see that Annex 2 shows the licence conditions that are specific to this particular site. Now, without labouring the point, even a rapid glance down those will show that those conditions are very general and there's not very many of them. So in short, 13 Molsham Street has a premises licence and has had so, you've heard, since 2018. It can trade till 10 o'clock at night most of the week. It already benefits from the deregulation of entertainment, which would allow live and recorded music throughout those hours. And as you've seen on this licence, there are very few and very general conditions that are part of it, whereas we, as I hope you will agree, intend to operate a far tighter ship. Now, there were, as I've mentioned, there were several comments in the representations about the undesirable proximity of licensed premises to the mosque. In fact, there was one, I think it was number 5 in the bundle, that said it is inconceivable that there can be a licensed pub next to the mosque. It seems that perhaps some of those making representations weren't possessed of all of the facts. It's my understanding that the licence that's in existence for this place, if it's successful, that will be surrendered in due course later this year. Now, I'd like to move to the existing tables and chairs matter. This, of course, is not a Licensing Act 2003 permission. It's a Highways Act matter that other departments of the council have dealt with, but I believe it's closely aligned to some of the issues that come up today. The significance of the existence of this is that there is already a document, there is already permission that governs the use of the pathway. If you look at pages 18 through to 24 in our bundle, you can see those permissions kindly provided by your licensing officers. The first pages are words. You come to the back, 23 shows you the sorts of tables and chairs that are involved. And on page 24 is a plan of the premises. Now, you can see, looking at that plan, that the area of the tables and chairs extends all the way up the right-hand side, which is the southern aspect of the building. It extends all the way up there. However, it isn't across what I would call the high street end. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a tandem application through other parts of the council in relation to a tables and chairs licence for this area. But at the moment, this is what exists. Now, if I could take you back to page 18, you'll notice that the current permission, the first 4 sections provide some obligations. They are required to have 5 removable barriers to separate the tables and chairs from the users of the highway. Section 2 talks about what sort of tables and chairs and how many, but delineates the area involved, saying that it's essentially 1.8 metres wide. Number 4 talks about it not being used after 10 o'clock at night. Now, if I could take you to page 25 in the bundle, you will see a photograph which is of that southern aspect of the pathway. I'm told that there are brass markers that delineate that authority, but I can't see them in the picture. I didn't notice them when I visited. And if you turn over the page at page 26, there's an aerial view of the same site, and you can see the dimensions involved of that path. That area in green is the 1.8 metre width of that tables and chairs permission. So these papers, this information provides you a little about the geographical context that the application is made within. So at this stage, I'd like to take you to the premises plan, which is part of the council bundle. The licensing report. It consists of 2 pages. They don't appear to be numbered. One page has got the 3 floors on it, and one page has got a single ground floor image. The single ground floor image, you'll notice, I think this was one of these matters that was amended early on in the process, and it seems that the outside licensed area, which is the area that's hatched, was originally part of the application but has subsequently been withdrawn, and it's been withdrawn for a number of reasons, not least of which is because it creates a buffer zone between any operations of the mosque and the operations of 13 Molson Street. Now, whilst I've got the plan in front of you, perhaps you can have a look, and you can see on the halfway up on the left-hand side, you can see the door. Now, the premises, I mention this because there are a number of comments in the representation that particularly mention this door, and I suspect that further misunderstandings may have crept in. There are 2 doors to the premises. The one on the southern aspect, it is wider, it is the disability access, and then the other one at the top of the drawing, the High Street side. I think you know what I mean by that. Now, the fears seem to be that that door's going to be moved somehow next to the mosque. That's the way it reads. And for the record, that's not the case. It never has been the case. That door is not moving. In fact, if you have a look at page 29 in our bundle, you will see an image of that area, and we measured it to see what the distance between those 2 points on the doors were. There's 8.5 metres between those 2 points. That's twice the height of a London double-decker bus. I'd like to tell you about the business. Now, the proposed offering at 13 Molson Street is a combination offering. It's a conventional bar, it's a gin production facility, and it's a gin school. Now, as well as this, there is also the facility for marketing their products for off-sale delivery via a variety of media forms, web being one of them. So if I can take you back to the plan that we had, which has got the 3 images on it, and I'll start at the top of the building, which is the far right hand of those images. This is going to be the gin school. You can see it's only a small part of the top floor that we're seeking to be licensed. This will house small classes teaching the production of the product of gin. Clients will be able to design and distill their own gins using a number of mini stills. I've not seen them, but I've had them described, each apparently capable of producing something like 2 litres of the product. They'll be talking about gin-based cocktails and such subjects. Classes are about 3 hours long. Their target audience is something like the 30 to 55s, and it's proposed that these classes will take place on Friday and Saturday evenings till about 9 o'clock in the evening, and also during the daytime on Saturday. Finer details are yet to be pinned down, and of course the distillation aspect of all of this is way outside the terms of the Licensing Act. As a matter of interest, on the top floor, the other area, which is sort of at the bottom of the drawing on that page, for information, that space is proposed to be turned into additional customer toilets and office space. If I can then move down to the middle of the 2 images, which is the first floor, this is proposed to be the production centre where they will develop, bottle and package their own product. And then down to the ground floor, this will be a conventional bar at one end. And if I can take you to page 28 in our bundle, you will see some photographs. And at the top photograph on page 28, you can see a wall which is to the left of the picture. And that is the eastern end wall, which is the one that adjoins the mosque. And that's where we intend to have the conventional bar. Incidentally, ahead of that, you can see some tables and chairs, which if you look at the plan, they're sort of in the bulge at the bottom of the building. I'll come back to those in a moment. Now, if you look at the lower picture on page 28, you can see Nikki standing there, and in front of where she's standing is an alcove, and behind her is the door onto the southern aspect. Now, in that alcove, we propose to put the production still for the unit there. Now, this still will only be used during the morning, so by the time we open at midday, the still will have cooled down, and it will become a feature item in the premises. Now, the rest of the space downstairs will be set to tables and chairs, and over the page on page 27, you get a view of the space that we are talking about. It's not vast. In addition, we're going to offer some conditions which we'll get to shortly about the numbers of tables and chairs, so any fears about removing them and turning into a vertical drinking establishment are dealt with. And I've mentioned earlier, on that bulge that you saw on the picture, that's going to be turned into a booth, which I understand will accommodate 10 people. Now, the outside area you have already heard about, which weather and licence conditions permitting will be accessible via the bifold doors that you can see on the ground floor plan. Now, Nikki anticipates employing something like 10 staff and developing them in-house, personal licence, first aid, health and safety, those sort of qualifications. And it's felt that the sales of alcohol will be predominantly via a waiter and waitress service to the tables, although it will be possible for individuals to go up to the bar. Now, this will be a unique facility in Essex, laid out in this particular format, and it's only one of a very small handful in the country. I think Nikki said it was less than 10, 9 or 10. We hope, therefore, that it's going to bring a unique and enriching experience to the city. But before I move on, I'd like to take you once more back to this plan and look at the first floor. Now, the first floor, you will notice, is not part of the licensed area. We're not looking for any permissions there. Now, we understand that next door in the mosque, the floor on which the worship takes place is indeed the first floor. So the only area where we're asking for a licensed area to directly abut, inside or out, is on the ground floor on the eastern end, where I mentioned the bar was. And as you will hear shortly, we've got plans to employ some acoustic measures to control that environment. Now, I'd like to move on, just for clarity, to what it is we actually seek. They were mentioned by Lacey. I think I got them all in order. So the premises are going to be open every day of the year, starting at midday, and Sunday to Wednesday it will close at 11 o'clock at night, Thursday at midnight, Friday and Saturday 2 o'clock in the morning, and the only seasonal variation is New Year's Eve, which, if it doesn't fall on a Friday and Saturday, will be 2 a.m. The licensable activities are sought from midday until the close of business. You've heard provision of live and recorded music, late night refreshment, and the sale of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises. I'd like to deal with each of those because there's issues with each. Now, live and recorded music. You will note that the permissions sought are only Friday and Saturday. We have the deregulation until 11 o'clock should we want to do it. It's only Friday and Saturday that we seek to go later. Now, the music the entertainment that we envisage is of a background nature rather than as a primary attraction to customers. The primary attraction to customers is that this is a gin destination. The premises is of a modest scale, and as I've mentioned, with restrictions around the table and chairs, there's really not room to be putting in huge entertainments there in any case. What is clear is that there were some representations which I think the individuals writing them had the impression that this place was going to be open very late, all days of the week, with noise and music, and that's just, frankly, not the case. Now, another point that there may be a misunderstanding about is late night refreshment. There was at least one representation that made reference to it. You will know that this relates to the provision of hot food and drink after 11 o'clock at night. And that means it's irrelevant to us from Sunday through to Wednesday when we shut by 11. Now, there are kitchen facilities at the premises, but there are no intentions to be providing hot food into the evening. And so, therefore, this late night refreshment authority relates only to something like tea, coffee and, hot drinks. It's hard to see how that would excite too many emotions. And now moving on to the alcohol, as I've mentioned, it's for retail sale, consumption on and off the premises. And as I'm about to go through with you, we have some suggestions in relation to what we think are a really robust set of conditions. Now, when Nikki first made the application, she made a competent job of it, outlining the measures she proposed to promote the licensing objectives. However, on reflection and with familiarity of perhaps the more complex sections of the Section 182 guidance, it seems that some of the language used would probably struggle to meet the requirements of the general principles around licence conditions. So today we make a proposal, and that is, rather than rely on later interpretation of Nikki's offerings, or perhaps even extend today's offering hearing even further in discussion, that we offer you an alternate set of conditions. Now, these conditions are unique to these premises, but are formulated with the benefit of the Licensing Act and what has worked well elsewhere. Now, to be clear, this is an expansion of the material originally submitted by Nikki, and we have in advance provided this information to your licensing team so that they have time, and perhaps you've had time to consider them too. Now, we hope that you will agree that this falls within the discretion that you as a committee today have regarding attachment of conditions. Now, if I can take you to our bundle, there are two documents in there in relation to the conditions. The first I shall only touch upon. Page 30 to 32 is a straightforward copy and paste of the language that Nikki first offered in her application. Pages 33 to 36 contain the alternate conditions, and I'd like to go through those a little more closely. I, of course, respect that you have had an opportunity to go through them. So, page 33, you'll notice on the top left in blue, there's a comment there regarding the numbers that have been offered up. As mentioned at the beginning, as the site works here are yet to be completed, some of the finer detail about the dimensions of tables and chairs and that sort of thing are yet to be finalised. And so we've put in some placeholder numbers based upon a loose estimate, and it's our undertaking that we would provide you these details prior to being open to the public. So number one talks about the maximum capacity on the interior ground floor. We've put in a placeholder of 80. Number two is the one that talks about the number of tables, a minimum number of tables. That's about having the comfort about it not being stripped out to a stand-up bar. Number three speaks about respect of the neighbours. So during Ramadan, the external tables and chairs to the southwest aspect of the premises shall not be deployed after 6 o'clock each day, and the bifold doors shall remain closed except in the cases of emergency. The door on this aspect of the building won't be used after 6 o'clock each day except as emergencies. It's possible we need to put something in there about disability access, but otherwise. The next two conditions relate to Challenge 25 matters, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. Number 6 relates to making sure that there's such material at point of sale on any website. 7 relates to having a proper refusal book. Number 8 and 9 are in relation to training staff to do with alcohol sales and other emergency matters. All of these I'm going to come to in our challenge book shortly. Number 10 is about having an incident log, and over the page on page 34 you can see the items that we say that we will record. Number 11 is about the having a written authority for the delegation of the DPS's power. 12 and 13 relate to CCTV, and this is a form of words that has found favour with Essex Police in other environments. Number 14 is a special case, relates to noise management and unacceptable behaviour. And if I can ask the committee just to park that one to one side, because I'm going to come back to that in more detail. 15 and 16 relate to audio speakers and not emptying the bins after 9 o'clock at night. That's about noise. Number 17, all doors, including any bifold doors and windows, to remain closed except for access and egress after 9 o'clock in the evening. So we're talking about maintaining control of that after 9 o'clock. 18, it's about on the days that the premises is open after midnight. We're not going to have people rolling up there after midnight and being allowed in. Midnight is the cut-off. No one's allowed in, no one's allowed back in unless they're smokers. 19, on a Friday and Saturday, this boils down to the door on that south-facing aspect won't be used, again, except in case of emergency. 20 is about putting up signage asking customers to respect the neighbours, essentially. 21 is about litter control and the steps we're going to take daily to manage it. 22, 23 and 24 relate to the having door staff, SIA door staff, On the days that we're open later than midnight, we'll have door staff on duty from 9. The others talk about the records that they will keep and how they will be attired so that they can be readily seen. And the last condition relates to regular checks on an hourly basis inside the premises and out in relation to the deterrence of use of drugs, maintaining public safety, and importantly, maintaining good order. The last part is about the records that we'll keep in relation to that, and we will make those things available to. Now, if I may, I'd like to take you briefly through this document, the challenge book. This speaks to some of these conditions, and it indicates the nature of our business management style. This is the sort of thing that when enforcement officers come into the premises, they will be given this as a single point of reference. So I'll go through this quite fast. Pages 3 and 4 relate to visits from statutory authorities, and the point of these is to start an audit trail. So if there are issues that are arisen, they are dealt with competently and objectively, and they don't get lost or pushed under the carpet. There's a record. Pages 5 to 10 relate to training materials to do with age-restricted goods, and this might form the basis of initial training for new staff to familiarise them with the environment which they're in. 11 and 12 are a reminder to the licence holder about some of the obligations they face. 13 and 14 are a manifestation of the mandatory condition in relation to age verification policies. 15 and 16 are where we'll keep our training records. So this is who's a personal licence holder, who's a first aid certificate, etc. Accessible by the authorities. Page 17 and 18 are where we'll keep our incident records, and you've seen in the condition the sort of material that we are saying that we will require, we will be required to maintain. 19 and 20 are where we keep our written authority, the delegation of the DPS's authority to sell alcohol. Pages 21 and 22 are training materials by Essex Police in relation to child sexual exploitation, specifically on licensed premises. Pages 23 to 26 are where we'll record our refusals, our challenges. So if you look too young, if you haven't got ID, if you look like you're too drunk, for any reason, if we challenge people, this is where we'll keep the record. And the last pages in this book relate to door staff register. So who it is, who are they, what are their SIA badge numbers, have we checked to see if they're still current, and these will be available to the authorities in the event that there's an incident. It's all there. I'd like to move to the representations now, if I may. As I've said, I'm not going to do them individually. I hope that you will agree that there are some common themes. I'd like to start with the responsible authorities. You've heard about it in your report. Section 912 of statutory guidance makes clear that the authority's primary source of advice in relation to licensing objectives is other responsible authorities. There are none. Significantly, the police talk about the matters of crime and disorder, including hate crime. There's nothing from them. The Environmental Protection Services deal with many subjects, but are specialists in relation to public nuisance and noise. There's nothing from them. And the Quality Assurance and Safeguarding Service speak in relation to child protection matters. There's nothing from them. Now, because of the widespread and number of the representations, to fully grasp the details of what they contained, we went through a process of listing them all out, irrespective of their merit as far as the licensing legislation was concerned. And it was apparent that it was very heavily, if not entirely, opinion based. We didn't see anything that looked like objective evidence, and I've not today received any documentary evidence to support any of the claims that are made therein. So we then took all of these comments and went through them as fairly as we could to see what we could confidently say were irrelevant to the licensing objectives, and we took them out. Now, amongst the items, I'm just going to list some of the things we've taken out to point them out, but I would remind you, of course, I'm sure you're acutely aware of Hearing Regulation 19B that requires you to disregard comment that doesn't speak to the licensing objective. So, amongst those that we took as being irrelevant were the question of need for licensed premises came up a few times, the question of the intensification in numbers of premises. Now, there is no cumulative impact policy in place here. The question of impact on police resources, that's already held not to be relevant, and the police didn't make any comment anyway. There were a number of matters that were overtly for your planning committee colleagues rather than yourselves. As you've heard at 3.4 in your papers, matters that were driven by religion or relative morality were removed, as they are irrelevant to the Licensing Act. And there were a number of comments about what happens if a licence is granted and they don't comply with the rules. And we've disregarded those because that's a matter of wild speculation, and the law is the law. There was one matter in there, and I hope in fairness it was a misunderstanding. I think it was representation number 4 in your bundle, made reference to a website, ilivehere.co.uk. And we had a look at that, and that's the additional page you should find in your bundle, which is a report, hopefully even-handedly, about a visit to that site. Now, what we did when we went and saw this site, the claim was that it had crime statistics on it, but what we found was a thing that said worst places to live in Essex, with comments like Colchester, OMG, in it, whatever gears, where's Fick. We didn't feel that this was the sort of material that would move the committee. There were 10 pages of this. You can see there were a couple of comments that related to Chelmsford, nothing that had any bearing, we felt, on this. So having gone through this process of stripping out those matters that stood head and shoulders as being irrelevant, we were left with the following potential topics. And these are the ones I'm going to talk to you about. There's noise impact upon the activities of the mosque and the worshippers therein. There was a fear of crime and disorder, within which falls the fear of hate crime from the users of the mosque. And there was a heavy and repeated emphasis on the term Islamophobia. There were concerns for the fear of the welfare of children arising from their exposure to alcohol consumption. There were concerns arising from the repositioning of the door, but as I hope you've heard, that's something of a red herring, so I don't intend to go into that. And there were some issues arising from the narrowing of the highway. So I'd like first to talk to you about the question of noise. Now, in our conditions, we've offered a number that speak directly or indirectly, in some cases, to noise, restrictions during Ramadan, the doors and windows being closed, no emission after midnight, no external speakers, not emptying the bins late, having door staff and doing checks for good order. But there was one condition you will recall on page 34, which I said I'd come back to. That's number 14. Now, number 14 says the licence holder will have a written policy for the management of noise and unacceptable behaviour with the intention of maintaining good relations with the neighbours. The policy will be lodged with the licensing authority by that date, as outlined. That will be by the time we open, in essence. So I'd like to then take you to pages 37 to 41, which is the draft document that forms the policy, this noise policy. It is draft. We do have some issues around site works, what sort of hardware is going to go in, so this does need to be finalised. I'm not going to dwell on this greatly. Our intention, to be good neighbours, to minimise the risk of disturbance. That's our primary intention. We go on to talk about the noise-sensitive premises. We say we understand that the site is potentially in use through 24 hours. We know the public prayer schedule. We respect there are times of particular sensitivity, for example, Ramadan, when the mosque and the area immediately outside may be intensified. And we've offered conditions in the licence to address these. We seek to work with the mosque to identify acceptable levels of noise. That should be really very straightforward to work with any neighbour to that level. Now, we note that the primary area of the mosque used for worship is on the first floor and will be adjacent to our production facility. Now, although that first floor is nothing to do with the licensing application before you today, we understand from a noise perspective that to be good neighbours, we need to make sure that that doesn't interfere. Over the page, on page 38, we go on to talk about noise sources and how we're going to look at them. And this document has been arrived at largely by reference to this document, which is the British Beer and Pub Association Effective Management of Noise from Licensed Premises Guidance. This is specifically referenced in your Statement of Licensing Policy at 5.17, and it's from that we've created this document for the premises. Now, it goes on to talk about where the noises might come from, and I've mentioned there's this operational question with the facility on the first floor. However, on page 39, it talks about noise from entertainment. What this spells out is that we realise there's a risk. We realise that we might need to review what we're doing, and we might, for example, even need to think about having noise limiters, which are hugely expensive. And we talk about the fact that the duty manager will do routine patrols. We're alive to the question of entertainment clearly being one of those subjects that is a risk. Now, there is a point there in the last part of that paragraph about noise from entertainment I draw your eyes to. We note that the ground floor wall to the east of the building appears to include a void space, and we're exploring opportunities to employ an acoustically deadening material. That's that wall with the bar on it. Turns out it was a false wall and there's a gap. But probably the key bit from which you should derive some comfort is the next couple of lines. We will employ a suitably qualified acoustician to install our sound systems so that noise or vibration does not interfere with our neighbours. Then we come on to this question of noise from external activities and behavioural noise by the customers. And if you turn over the page, page 40, you'll see in context, we acknowledge wholly there is a risk that patrons, particularly disinhibited through the consumption of alcohol, will make noise through raised voices, offensive language, or general but unacceptable high spirits outside our premises, and that smokers present a particular risk. Now, this falls within what we call our one warning policy. It's a very simple thing. It's very old-fashioned. If that happens, we will talk to people. If they do not stop it, they will be barred. That's nice and simple. It's old-fashioned. We think it will work. The rest of the document goes on to talk about how we will do that. It talks about some feedback, so we're not being complacent. This is a continual feast. We're continually reviewing the horizon, talking to the neighbours, finding out what the problems are. And the last bit goes on to talk about the records that we will keep in relation to that. So I'd now like to move on to the question of the fear of crime. Now, peppered throughout the representations are references to the fear of crime. But the fear of crime is not the same as the reality of crime. Now, fear of crime is difficult. It's largely an intangible concept. It manifests in each of us differently. My apprehensions are different to your apprehensions. They're different to my grandmother's apprehensions. So the best we can really do is to bring to you what objective facts are available, bearing in mind that there are some constraints about where we are in this point in time with available information. We know that the lead agency is the police in these matters, and the fact that the police have not made representations, they've written to you to say that they're not making representations. We feel it's reasonable, and we hope that you will see it as reasonable to conclude that they therefore didn't believe that there were sufficient grounds to fear for the licensing objectives, and particularly the crime and disorder matter, and by implication, therefore, that there was insufficient evidence to mount that argument. Now, that relates to all classes of crime, including that which we call hate crime. Now, I am, and I hope you are, confident that the potential sensitivities of this matter that fall outside of licensing were not missed by the police, but still there's no representation from them. Now, a number of representations made references to various distasteful bodily fluids being found in the doorway of the mosque, and many of the representations offer the opinion that this is a direct Islamic attack on them, on their culture. There isn't any evidence one way or the other that I'm aware of on that. However deplorable that behaviour is, no one can say that that's got anything to do with the applicant or the applicant's premises. It's irrelevant to this application. Now, it's our contention that that sort of behaviour is more likely to result from being in a quiet, dark and largely unpopulated nook in the city. Now, you may be familiar with a very well-used crime prevention theory and practice known as routine activity theory. And one aspect of this theory that's widely used is a principle called capable guardians. Now, capable guardians are people and systems like CCTV whose very presence deters exactly the sort of behaviour that we've heard about the mosque suffering. And we say that the presence of a new and vibrant business, especially one that's got an outdoor presence and door staff like we do, is going to very much more likely improve the experience of the mosque and its users, because inadvertently we are acting as capable guardians. It wasn't our plan, but we have become capable guardians. So if I can take you to pages 42 and 43 on our bundle, these relate to the crime disorder specifically in Molsham Street. Now, there are, as you can see there are two prime sources, both lead back to the police. There's Essex Police, who we'd go to first, freedom of information. It takes a month. We've done that. We haven't got anything back. That's where we are. The second source is...
Excuse me, Mr. Bell. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Please.
The committee have read in great detail all the documents. I'm just quite aware we've got quite a few people who want to speak, and if I allowed them the same amount of time as you, we'd probably be here by very, very late. So if you could just sum up, that would be great. I'd be grateful so that we can allow other people to speak.
Well, there are matters here in relation to child protection that I would like specifically to.
Yeah, that's fine. But if you could just be winding up and do that, that's fine.
Thank you very much. No, understood. Okay, so let me jump ahead from that, assuming that you've read what's in the crime papers. There ain't much, is what I'm saying about crime. The protection of children from harm. When you look at the representations, they raise repeatedly this question about the exposure of children to the existence of and the practice of the consumption of alcohol. So what I'd ask you to hold in mind is that the consumption of alcohol is not a licensable activity. It's not a thing that we need permission from the authority for. I would point you very quickly to section 182 guidance 2.22 to 2.32 that speaks directly to child protection. It talks about the sort of risks that are involved. These are hard-hitting risks. Exposure to adult films, topless bars, striptease, lap dancing, and the list goes on. Nothing in our application says that that's what we're going to do, and there are no representations to suggest that's what we're going to do. Chelmsford's own statement of licensing policy has at, I think it's page 19, it actually says 6.2, general relaxation of the Licensing Act, as amended, giving accompanied children greater access to licensed premises, is a positive step aimed at social change in a family-friendly atmosphere. I'm not going to dwell too much on the documents around the NSPC, simply to say that when you're talking about child protection, it's about significant harm. There are lots of references to safeguarding in the representations, but just saying the word safeguarding doesn't imply that there are risks. There's no evidence to support risks of significant harm. The document you will have seen in there about Essex safeguarding is a very helpful one. It is produced specifically in relation to licensing matters. It echoes very closely the hard-hitting issues in relation to Section 182 license, the guidance. But it says nothing about children simply passing by. Nothing. Now, we say that when it comes down to these issues of morality, it's not, except in some very specific cases, it's not the state's position to be interfering with the morality of bringing up children. I shall move on. Now, there are some issues to do with the narrowing of the highway. I think I would summarise them as saying, should the users of the mosque wish to congregate outside their premises during Ramadan, you can see that they do so with respectful understanding of the applicant. Now, on page 58 of the bundle, you will have seen, I'm sure, the alternative access to the mosque. That's 85 centimetres wide. I measured the door to the mosque. It is wider, 3 centimetres wider. So, all things considered, people can access the mosque without having to walk past our premises if it causes issues of morality. So this applicant is offering you a completely fresh approach, but with an acute awareness of the sensitivities that we all know fall outside of the Licensing Act. She wants to be a good neighbour. She met with them met with the Mosque management in February, and she's committed in this bundle, as you've got before you. She's committed to that expression, and I hope you can see that we've gone through the concerns in detail. I hope that you can see that what we have offered speaks directly to the active promotion of all the licensing objectives, Section 182 guidance, and that they comply directly with your own statement of licensing policy. Thank you for your tolerance. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. William Butcher did want to come in for a point of clarification, and the committee will ask questions later on after we've heard from the complainers. But
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mr. Bell, you might be able to just clarify and assist me on just one technical point, and that is that the start date originally applied for this license is the 1st of September.
Yes.
But at the start of your presentation, you asked that if the committee is minded to grant the license, and I stress that's if the committee is minded, it's entirely a decision for the committee, then the start date, you ask, be brought forward to the 1st of August. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, it concerns me slightly because I'm not convinced that that would be something that is within the remit of the committee to do. It certainly doesn't come within the committee's powers under Section 18, subsection 4 of the 2003 Act. So really, just as a matter of fairness to you and your client, I'm just giving you the opportunity to see whether there is anything that you want to add to that. Are you aware of any basis for?
No, your position, Mr. Butcher, is well made, and I don't disagree with the legal position. This is about offering it to the committee as a matter of discretion. If they don't feel that they're able to do it, that's clearly a matter for them.
Yes, I mean, I think you understand where I'm coming from, don't you?
I do.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Bell. If you could turn your camera off, then I'll move on. I would like to invite the objectors to put their case, please. Ayman Syed, Mr. Syed, would you like to come forward, please?
Yeah, hi. So I might be a bit nervous because this is the first time I'm doing such a thing, and after hearing the argument presented... You're
very welcome. Please take your time. If we can help at all, we'd like you to be very much at ease. Please feel free to take a breath, take a glass of water, and you're very welcome. Please do it in your own time.
Yeah, thank you. It's a month of Ramadan, so I can't even drink. So yes, I'll be slightly nervous, but it's a bit difficult to top what's been heard, because obviously this is coming from a professional who's a lawyer and probably does this on a regular basis, and they presented a very good argument in terms of how it's going through it with every single point looked at in detail. So what I had done was I'd prepared a statement that I was thinking of saying. So I will probably still do that at the end. But what I thought I would do was try and take through some of the points that were just raised and see if I can answer those points firstly. And then after that, I'll go through the statement that I made. And if there's any questions, then let me know with it. So yeah, as I said, this is new. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have experience in this. It was a good, proper, cohesive argument that's been done, but we can see a lot of the time was monopolized from it. So I'll try and keep it short. So at first we were looking, firstly, when this objection or this application came through, we were thinking of giving one representation, and it was going to be from myself and from the chairman, Mr. Nawaz, because I've been with the committee for about 10 years now, and you can see that I'm actually a focal point with a lot of the community in terms of issues that they face and things that they report. So quite often they're not the ones going to the police or to the council for issues. So it is generally underreported on certain items that go on. So the idea first was myself and the chairman actually put in an objection. After talking to the council, it found out that actually being a representative for the argument isn't good, and we actually need to then submit multiple representations. So that's when I asked members of the community to put in objections. When they then put in their objections, it tends to be less cohesive because it's based on their religious view or their religious understanding with less understanding of the law. So, for example, arguing that there's a bar next door, there's going to be morality issues and all of these things, I see as irrelevant to the process of the decision that needs to be made. It needs to be based around risks and associations to those. So I completely understand where those things are irrelevant, and my argument isn't based on that at all. Yes, from a religious aspect, we do not drink, but again, we don't impose that non-drinking on others. The reason we don't drink is the loss of judgment, the loss of control, the aspects of not being able to think or talk clearly like we all are today. And if we've had a drink or two, we might be different, and you probably wouldn't want to be talking in the meeting because of whatever. So the point is that when we do drink, it does change the way we are as a person, and my concern is related to the risks associated with that, in particular the late night licensing to it. So I noted a few points down where, let me see. Share. So on page 3, one of the arguments that were put there with the red buildings marked out was showing that these locations of where the existing premises are, and showing that actually we're surrounded by a number of late night premises, and therefore giving an objection to this one would be, wouldn't be right because they're all around us. But it's true, they are near us. But what you can't tell from those sets of drawings is that all their entrances and all their footpath areas are away from the mosque. As was highlighted by my good friend earlier, he said that is a quiet corner and it's generally less busy. So we do not get passing trade generally from people around the area. So the footpaths and related to all those establishments, this is the backside area of it. None of it is in the front. So the problems that the Muslim community have faced has generally been leaving the mosque to and from going to the mosque. So this is the area that they've had abuse, whether it be towards town or whether it be crossing Molsham Street or whether it be passing the bars along the area. This is the time, those are the areas that they face. It's not been directly next door or outside the mosque. We've had some issues there, but what I'm trying to say is that by saying the argument that there's others around, it's weak. It's not a good enough reason, in my view. So yeah, nighttime is slightly further from us. All the entrances and locations are away. They do not pass the mosque. But by having the Only Way Gin right next door to us, it is going to pass the mosque area. Our congregation will be passing the customers and everything, and this is the potential risk that I'm talking about. Taj Mahal was used as an example. That's actually closed down now. The entrance of it is on the other side. So there is even the courtyard that's mentioned, the front entrance is actually on the other side next to the main entrance. I can't remember so it's not on this side of it, it's not on the Parkway side. That's the back entrance. The farm shop, so we were talking about how that's been there. It's been open for 2 years, but actually after the work and time the owner had spent in actually doing the place up, I think it was only open for about 6 to 8 months. So it actually did not last long in terms of how long the property lasted for. We got on well with them. We had no issues with them. They served alcohol as part of their service, and because it was daytime trade, it didn't cause us any issues, and we didn't actually put in a complaint or any issue to that because we didn't see a particular risk associated with that business. But as I say, it did not last long. There wasn't enough there to judge based on the evidence of how things were going to go on going forward, but because it always finished early, we didn't have any issues faced there. Page 25 and 26 of the document, the area where the congregation meet and stand to the foot. So yeah, this was in the drawings, it's showing it's quite a narrow pathway, and it's showing that The tables and the chairs are going to be, 1.5 or 1.8 meters across. Yeah, it looks fine on paper, but as you can imagine, in reality, when you start putting the barriers and the lines up like we've had with the cafe beforehand, it's never there. It's further out. We never raised it as an issue. We never made a complaint on it, but it was fine. It's the way it was. So drawings are one thing, but how they're actually carried out and put into practice are different. And you will find that there were more tables and chairs than what was specified than actually there. So the entrance does become narrow, and for me, that's the concern. Some of the objectors, they were talking about the door on the side, and they were worried about the door being moved. From my understanding, that's not what they were worried about. We're not talking about a change of where the door is going to be moved to. We're talking about where the current existing door is. That side door, the disabled access one, if that is going to become the main door, this is where you will get people congregating. And at the moment, every business has always had the main door as the front side. Dunkin' Donuts, all of them, every single person has had their main entrance there, which again has kept the focus away from the entrance of the mosque. So by changing the entrance to be the main part to this side of it, it brings
I'm afraid you've frozen. I can't hear you. Can you try to continue? Unfortunately, we can't hear you. Could you try muting and unmuting again to see if that works? Otherwise, I'll ask somebody else to come in and we'll come back to you. Okay, I can't hear you. If you can hear me, perhaps you could dial in again, and I'll give you the opportunity to speak after somebody else. Thank you. Councillor Pooley, would you like to make representations, please, to the committee?
Can you hear and see me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just trying to find my representations. I've been trying to follow very hard the representations of the professional supporter of the application. So give me just 1 second, if you wouldn't mind. If you can tell me the page number that it's on, that'd be really good too.
I'm just trying to get back on again. Okay. Yeah.
Because I don't know how you've been getting on, but switching from one set of papers to another set of papers is not very easy.
Sorry,
anyway,
apologies. I heard I dropped off there, so I don't know if you can hear me again. No, I can't hear you.
Come back in. Are you happy to come back in?
Who, Eamon, are you talking about?
Eamon, Mr. Syed, yes.
Yep, I'm happy to come back in.
Do you want to come in and finish up before Mr. Pooley comes in?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I don't actually know where I dropped off.
I can't see you, by the way. Could you put your camera on at all? Thank you.
Sure, I will try to do that. It says it's disabled by the administrator. The camera is disabled by the administrator.
We haven't changed anything at our end. It should be okay. No. If you just carry on with audio, that should provide.
Yeah, carry on with audio. That's
sure.
Fine.
Can you let me know where I actually got to? Because I don't know where I dropped off.
I can't remember the last thing that you were talking about, the tables and chairs outside and the entrance.
Yeah, so the tables and chairs, that's been specified on page 25 and 26 about I think it's 1.8 meters, about the area that they're looking to take. I mean, it looks fine in principle on paper, but in reality, when you start putting the rope and the boundaries, it's actually a lot more. The tables and chairs tend to be a lot more than what gets specified. We never raised this with the cafe that was there, but I'm just saying that it does actually take up more space than what's specified and looks like in a drawing, because that's just not realistic. Some of the objectors have mentioned about the side entrance of the door. about it being moved. It's actually, I don't think they actually meant the door being moved. I think what they're talking about is using that side entrance and that becoming the main point of entrance, and that will basically put it adjacent to the mosque next to it. What we've had is we've had a number of people come into the mosque lost. I'm talking drunk lost, or going in there and mistaking it for something else. So I see more of those issues happening once the Ways Jinn decide to move their main entrance to this side. Had it been stuck to the other side, as all the other previous neighbours that we've had, then that would probably help the issue. But by moving it next to us, even with the security and everything, we still see people coming and going and potentially going into the mosque by accident, intoxicated. So we've got no objections. So our objections really isn't the type of business it is. I can see the setup of what they're looking to do. It sounds respectable, but it really does come down to the late night license and the coming and going that's going to occur because of the tables and chairs in the area. As was highlighted, that yes, our main worship is done on the first floor, so taking sound considerations into place, that is great. But we also do use the upstairs and ground floor. We've got speakers set up for the ground floor and the top floor, and when the congregation increases, we're talking Fridays and other religious festivals, those floors do get used. So therefore we would expect some sound increase to occur from that side of the building. So far we've never had an issue because the buildings, the type of uses that have occurred with the next door have been different. 18, where we were talking about midnight use coming and going, we do have late night prayers that do occur. We also open the doors are open, and in the heat we often find we open those doors out, so we expect the sound levels and the people again coming and going to occur, and we think there would be some disruptions. I don't know if that's a fact that you take into it. Last year we actually had, it's a sad situation where we actually had to have security presence in front of our mosque because of an increase in Islamophobia. You're saying there's no stats related to it, but this was something that we've conveyed to the police. I've been involved with the police for over 10 years now, and I was chair of their independent advisory group, so I'm aware of the hate crime statistics and the issues that relate to the area. And most of the time, because of my close links with the police, we've been able to keep a good control of it. So my objections today wouldn't come forward if I didn't think there was something related to it, and I'm not talking from a religious matter, but actually from a risk perspective. So when there are increased tensions that go on globally, police do increase their presence around the mosque. This is often done covertly, so people aren't aware of the CCTVs are turned and pointed to the mosque, so that's aware. So these things do happen. So I expect when we have an increased license next door at late night, I do think there is a risk that could happen related to it. One thing that the person proposing came forward with, not recognising that we have actually had incidents next door. We have had a soldier and his two friends attempt to break into the mosque one time. This was a few years ago, and then they came back in and they broke into the mosque and did some damage. So this, it's there. We have had issues related to people being abused, related to people being spat at. This has happened going to and from the mosque. Again, this is not in a public eye because people are afraid of coming forward. And you'll see even today with the representations of the Muslim community, it's only myself and Nawaz who tend to come forward and speak on behalf of the community. Police are involved. Okay, missed the break-ins, not about moving the door. Part of this is quiet corner, child exposure. So yes, this was some of the points that other people who are objecting, raising about the moral issues of children being exposed to alcohol. I've got no issue with that. I don't see that as a point, especially where we live. It's all around us. That's not really my concern. Where I do have an issue with is the potential abuse that they might receive, the wording that a customer might say while the children or the parents of these people go by. If we're talking a normal child aspect of child abuse, then yes, I agree. These things, protection, people look at. But when you start looking at Muslim children, it is much more targeted, where it's based around comments where people talk about being a terrorist or being a bomber, and these snide comments being put there will put children off from coming, and it will put parents off from bringing their kids. And it's something that they face in school, and we fear that they might face this with a new neighbour next door. So those were the objections I had in particular. I won't take long now. I'll quickly say what I had planned to say, which was a 5-minute thing, which covered the points that I wanted to make related to the recent application and what the backlash we've had from it. So this is my first time creating an objection. I do it with regret. And if the application is approved, then I understand it will be a difficult start for us with Nikki and the team, and I hope we can go forward with it, whatever outcome happens. So as a community, we want to remain peace with our neighbours, but as I say, I feel we're compelled to speak. The community as a whole have concerns, and generally they do not speak out due to fear of repercussions. Chelmsford Mosque has been established here for over 40 years. We've got on with our neighbours, and we've never had an issue. We're central in town. The congregation is a mixture of children, men and women, and the elderly come and go. And because it's so central, you get a lot of people walking, coming and going from the nearby areas. In our faith, we do not drink. The key, as I mentioned before, key reasons is the loss of inhibitions, because we need to remain with our thinking and clear judgment. But the objection that we have has got nothing to do with us as being Muslims and drinking in relation to this issue. The farm shop next door served alcohol as part of their day business, and this worked out fine for us. Looking at the crime stats near the mosque, it does not give a full picture. It's underreported, the abuse that we receive. The clear example is that the yellow advertiser, Essex Live, they've created an article. I don't know if anyone's seen it, and this is in Essex Live at the moment. They've taken the words from my objection and made a story out of it, and they've based it around the faith and based it around this Islamophobia. And what I wanted to share with you was some of the comments that came through from the Essex Live article from Facebook, and this will give you an example of the people who are around in the area who are commenting. And this is just commentary, but it gives you a flavour of what we have to deal with. A British soldier was butchered by members of your cult. You keep on Islamists. There are massive street movements created that will make the EDL look like a choir boy. This is no threat, it's reality. The absolute bloody cheek of Mohammedans. This is another comment.
I'm so sorry to stop you. Unfortunately, you've really put some succinct details forward, which we would take on board. But this article, I'm not aware of this article, and unfortunately, I don't think it's particularly relevant to this.
Well, the reason why
this hearing.
Sorry to interrupt. The reason why I raise it is because the objection that we've put in, which is now publicly available to The Only Way is Essex, that has been taken and put into the local Essex Chronicle, Essex Live. So they've taken that, recognised the Islamophobia related to the issue, and created the petition related to the jinn. So the reason I'm raising it is to show you the risk to the community related to the Islamophobia that we're seeing and the potentials that we see. So I'm just trying to make our argument stronger by saying these are the comments that people are making publicly on a forum for other people to see. They're saying, we don't want Abdul Sand or Solar.
If you could tie up your statement, that would be great. We've got other people who want to come in. Thank you so much for being so succinct in your deliberations.
I won't take long, but the last argument, it did take about 45 minutes, so it only feels a bit fair to give
and I completely understand that, but we have other people speaking on your behalf. That I'm hoping will take. You will have equal time if you look at both sides. But I'm very conscious that I want it to be fair with everybody having a chance to put their considerations forward.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's about 5 or 6 comments which basically relate to Islamophobia and the abuse that we receive. So I'll skip that through. So our imam on a regular basis is cleaning up outside the mosque related to vomit, urine and feces. We're not so sure, yes, highlighting having more people around might make that corner difficult, but again, that's a proposition, that's no known fact. We have drunk people that come to the mosque in the evenings, as I've mentioned. These don't get reported. During Ramadan, it's good to hear that they're looking to close it so that it won't be happening during the late night in the evenings. As I said, we've had soldiers who've broken into the mosque, the Braintree Mosque, which is not far from here. They've had smoke bombs grenades thrown into their mosque. This is issues around theirs. Not too far into London, I've shared it with the city councillors where there's been over 16 incidences related to Islamophobia and drinking. So to think that our community is not at risk or exposure is wrong. We would not be speaking today if we didn't think that there was a risk to the congregation. We have children who come to the mosque for classes, mainly in the morning, so I don't see an issue with that, but they're also coming in the evening for teaching and social play. The elderly are coming all times of day, including in the evening. So our Friday prayers, those haven't been discussed or raised by the proposer, of the fact that the congregation like to meet and chat, and the narrowing of the pathway is causing a potential risk. So I do see the only way, Jean, as a different establishment to the normal bar, and I think it will be popular, but I cannot see how they're going to mitigate the current risks and issues that we face, let alone once they have a late night license. That's it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your comments. I have 3 other people who would like to make representations. Councillor Pooley, Mohammed Nawaz and Mr Nassar Hussain. Councillor Pooley, would you like to go first?
May I come at the end of the representatives who are coming forward with objections from the mosque?
Yes, of course. Could I ask that all of you who speak, if you could not just reiterate everything that Mr Said has said very, very succinctly, that would be really useful. Thank you very much. So can I call on Mohammed Nawaz, please? Would you like to come forward?
Hello there. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Could you put your camera on, please?
Yeah, the camera wasn't working earlier, but I'll try on again.
Okay, it's fine, just audio. It would just be nice to see your face.
Okay, so I actually won't be very long because a lot of the points I was going to mention, Eamon has already covered. Okay, but I'd just like to stress that we've never ever objected before in the past. There are lots of alcoholic places around the place. We felt these were far enough not to bother us, even though we do get regular music hearing at in the evenings and later nights. We get regular disturbances, but we've learned to live with that. And we feel granting the gin application will further increase these problems. Eamon has already mentioned that we get noise coming in, drunken behavior, break-in, people urinating. I could carry on, which the imam regularly cleans up. We used to report these to the police, but we don't bother anymore because, the police just takes the report and then not much happens. So we've learned to live with it, and I think these are going to increase. And these have increased over the years as the number of alcoholic places have increased in Chelmsford. So has the crime, and so has all these break-in and drunken behaviours. We do use the mosque all the time. It's nice of the applicants to address these issues, but the mosque gets essentially use 24 hours. There are other activities going on, and they just want to sit there in a peaceful environment, and having noise next door will cause issues. No doubt about that. The other thing I wanted to sort of just mention, children have been scared to go past the place when the previous places were open. They have to be guided by children because of the abuse that they've got from the regular drinkers in the area, and I think that will also increase. And I think all the other sort of points were covered by Eamon himself. But we're happy to speak to the applicant. Like you said, we did speak to Nikki before the event, highlighted our concerns, and those concerns haven't really changed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your representations. Could I ask Mr. Nassar Hussain?
Nothing from me really. I think Eamon and Nawaz have both fully articulated the points that I would have brought up. So.
Thank you. Thank you for your participation, though. Thank you.
No problem.
Councillor Pooley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As I said, I am a councillor for this part of Chelmsford, and so one of the things that we have to pay attention to as local councillors are issues around the nighttime economy in the city centre, homeless people and where they go and how they behave and all the rest of it. And so this application immediately struck us locally as being a difficult one. The relevance of the faith is in the sense that it's not typical, is it, here? And we are a very inclusive society, and I hope that by and large the community that it represents finds us that way. But I think that we have to accept that the public antipathy towards followers of Islam is very, very close to the surface sometimes. And although you weren't aware of the article that Mr. Saeed referred to, you are aware of what's happened in Great Baddow when it became apparent that the Muslim community were going to take over a sports centre there, and some of the vitriol that sparked. So I think we have to make this link between fear and the objectives that as a licensing committee you have, because that fear reflects the fact that there is antisocial behaviour threatened and carried out in various ways in various parts of the country and various parts of the city, unfortunately, and is running very close to the surface. So fear in and of itself is clearly not an issue for you to consider, but what we have to accept is that that's a reflection of the underlying behaviours of some aspects of the community, and it's that behaviour that is right in front of you today. So it's not quite typical either, in the sense that the particular faith that we're talking about here and the way in which the mosque is used is very, very intensive on a lot of times of day and a lot of days of the week. If it was next to the cathedral, then you could say, well, we'll have different hours on a Sunday or something similar to that. So this is not an easy one, and I sympathise with the committee, because none of us, I'm sure, want to risk any escalation of the potentially criminal and antisocial behaviour that is running beneath the surface, and which is behind the fear that we're talking about. So one clarification I'd like from Mr. Butcher at some stage is which of these issues that are in front of you are matters for the planning committee and which of them are matters for yourselves. And whichever way the application goes today, I would like to ask that you as a committee reflect to the planning officers that some issues have come up which weren't for you to consider but are for them to consider. And I think there are crisscrosses around noise, and there are crisscrosses around the planning permission for the door being the main entrance rather than a subsidiary entrance, and various things like that, which are as much planning considerations as they are licensing considerations. I really, really welcome the fact that the if I understood it all correctly, it was a great rush and I couldn't follow it all in the papers that the applicant had given us. I very much welcome the detailed conditions and consideration that he's given to this issue. What I'm not aware of is whether those have been discussed with the objectors, because I'm sure that the willingness of the applicant to resolve some of these things is absolutely genuine, and it would be really nice to think that the mosque had been involved in working with them on the detail of those conditions. Unfortunately, if you're approving those conditions today, you won't have that that ability from the mosque to say this is enough or it's adequate or what about this, what about that, which I think is a bit of a shame. But it's great that they are looking at those conditions, and of course it's a reflection of the fact that they too regard this as a very, very sensitive application in a very, very sensitive location. And that's the way I'm sure that you will treat it. I really only want to dwell on one aspect of this, which is around the narrowing of the pavement. I think in other respects it's a question of weighting the things. I think all the objections have weight in the context of the licensing objectives, and it's for you to work out how much weight they actually have. The issue for me of the narrowing of the pavement is a really significant one, because the main pedestrian access to the mosque is that way. It is the fact that that pavement is not currently heavily used by the people who have been clients of Tickety-Boo in the past, and all the various incarnations of the use of these particular premises, including the most recent one. And so what we're looking at now is the likelihood of that wider bit of pavement, with or without seating areas on it, being much more heavily used in terms of people frequenting a licensed premises, which is under consideration today. And I think that the question for me would be, is there a way in which one can condition that or negotiate with the applicants about, if you're minded to approve it as overall, whether that can't be better negotiated? The narrowing of that pavement invites a greater degree of risk and incitement and intimidation than is currently the case and has currently been the case in the past, and a greater degree of intimidation is invited than would be the case if the entrance was not significantly moved. So if you're minded to approve it, I do think that needs to be highlighted, if it's a planning matter, to the planning committee. And I personally would like to see the conditions that the applicant is obviously prepared to discuss discussed in a lot more detail with the objectors before you came to your decision. But thank you for your time, Chair.
Thank you very much. Could I ask William Butcher to come in, please, on your comment there?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's absolutely correct what Councillor Pooley has said, that this application does raise some quite sort of novel and quite difficult issues. And one of the things that I will be doing as part of my role as legal advisor is to provide the committee with some detailed advice during the deliberation stage, and any decision issued by the committee will make reference to the advice that I have given the committee so that it's transparent. So I don't propose to really go into great detail here, other than to say that the Licensing Act 2003 is not concerned with religious beliefs or moral standpoints any more than, say, the planning regime is. What the Licensing Act 2003 is concerned with, rightly or wrongly, is what actually goes on the ground in the locality. And so any decision that the licensing committee makes must be evidence-based. There must be concrete evidence for its decision. And what is quite unusual about the Licensing Act is that it does provide a review mechanism, and that's where it differs greatly from the planning regime. With planning law, for example, if you grant planning permission, that's it. Here, if you grant a license, if there are problems on the ground, then it's possible for the police or indeed anyone to actually apply for a statutory review, and the matter then comes back to committee, and the committee can look at the evidence and can either impose conditions or indeed can actually revoke the license, and that happens on a fairly frequent basis. So there is that safeguard which is built into the Act. So I think that's all really I can say at this stage, Chair, unless we wish me to elaborate.
Thank you very much. That's really useful.
I'll come back briefly.
Yes, please.
I just need to explain that my screen is flickering wildly, and so I can't actually turn my camera and my microphone off. So I apologise if I shouldn't be there and visible anymore. I understand that. I think that the point that I was trying to make is that, and which we would confirm as local members, and was mentioned by Mr. Saeed, is that he had to persuade people to come forward and make representations to you. And that reflects also the fact that the many incidents to which he refers in the past have simply not been reported for fear of that escalating the level of antisocial behaviour and criminal behaviour that the location of an Islamic building can risk. And so it's hard to leap to the conclusion that there is evidence, but please don't dismiss the fact that there is a risk to the licensing objectives, because the evidence is not as comprehensive as you might expect in a residential neighbourhood, for example. The people here are feel inhibited from making representations.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
I do apologise. I'll try and keep finding this thing.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask, is there anybody else who hasn't spoken, who has previously made representations, who would like to speak? This is before the committee asks questions. No? Mr. Bell?
Can I just add a comment? Just a summary.
Sorry, who is that?
It's Mohammed Nawaz.
Yes, please do.
Just to summarise, I'd just like to stress that our concerns are real and based on facts, and Muslim community need to be heard. And we have never objected before for the 40 years, as we are good neighbours. Right? But anything we say nowadays gets distorted in the media and reported exhaustively, and that's why people are scared to come forward. Thank you.
We're very pleased to hear from you today. We are taking all your comments on board. We're looking at all the information that is relevant to this case. Please understand that we are taking what you say very seriously. Members of the committee, would you like to ask any questions? I can't hear anybody. Would anybody like to come forward?
Can I ask one question, please?
Yes, Councillor Davidson.
This is for the applicant. So could I ask you about the takeaway? I think people can bring their bottles and have them refilled, and there was some reference to them being not sealed. Could you explain a little bit about what that means? Does it mean they're not sort of factory sealed, but they've got a top on them when they carry them away? Please.
I'm afraid I must defer to Nikki on this. It's a matter of practice. Perhaps you could ask Nikki directly. I'll back out.
Okay, Nikki.
Yes, I'll answer that. Yes, so it's one of the things that we want to do. It's actually to be a little bit eco-friendly, and this is with the retail sales for bottles of gin. So if somebody has purchased a bottle of gin from us, so the bar will also double up as a shop. For a small discount, they can bring their bottle back, their empty bottle back, and have it refilled in the distillery, and then go home with that bottle for a small discount. So it will be filled with a new stopper, so with a new cap, but it won't be sealed, with a plastic sealant like it would be if you purchased a bottle from a shop. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. I thought that was probably the case. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Has anybody else got any questions? I think we've listened to very comprehensive representations on both sides. The committee have considered all the paperwork that's that's come before us. Are there any other questions? Okay. I hope that all relevant points have been raised today and put to the committee, and that everything's been adequately covered. I know that I feel that we've had a lot of information to consider.
Chair.
Yes. Sorry, who's that?
Matt Bell here. There's just a point of order, really. I don't know whether or not you were going to come back to me or not, but really to say, other than one thing I wanted to say, I think we're done. The one thing I wanted to say is a point that was raised in the representations, and it's to do with the lack of negotiation on points. Now, I hope what I'm going to say should be a reassurance to the users of the Mosque, and perhaps Councillor Pooley. It normally is the case that when representations are raised, the first case is to go and talk to people, understand the issue and negotiate with them, and then frame, you'll see where I'm going. However, in this particular case, we were asked to respect anonymity. So we did not have that facility to approach people. And I'm sure Nikki would want me to assure everybody concerned that if the committee are minded to grant this, we want to start this off the right way. We want to start this off as friends and continue to be friends. And please don't take the lack of contact as it meaning anything. It was simply a procedural obstacle which we were hampered by. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Has anybody else got any comments to make?
Yeah, if I could quickly say something, Chair.
Yep, please come in.
Question of the reps being anonymous, that is the case, but the applicant was still provided with the contact details for each person that had made reps, and we did let them know they were allowed to use them. They just weren't to share those details any wider. That's why on the website, for instance, all the representations are redacted, but the applicant does always get full copies and they are allowed to contact them through that method. Thank you.
Okay. It sounds like a misunderstanding. Thank you, everybody, today. The committee is now going to retire to deliberate. Due to the remote nature of the hearing, the meeting will be closed at this point. A decision notice will be emailed to all relevant parties either later that day or the following day. Thank you very much for your participation, everybody, and good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.